On paper, Canada is being dubbed a millionaire nation. We're looking at a country sitting on over $18.6 trillion. Yes, trillion with a T, in total combined household wealth, with more than 2.2 million people actually claiming millionaire status. It sounds like an absolute economic triumph, right? Well, hold that thought, because as we're going to see, these flashy headline numbers are actually hiding a completely different, much more stressful reality for the everyday person.
So here is the massive paradox we really need to unravel today. Why on earth does a nation that looks so incredibly rich on paper feel so absolutely broke in reality? You know what I'm talking about. You're an everyday working professional, you're bringing home what is statistically a decent or maybe even above average salary, and yet you constantly feel completely squeezed. Between inflation, the wild cost of groceries, and the relentless suffocating cost of housing, that whole millionaire nation status kind of feels like a cruel joke.
And the visceral, mathematical reality of that squeeze is just staggering. We're talking 177%. According to the data, Canada's household debt-to-income ratio has hit an eye-watering 177%. Think about what that actually means. For every single dollar of after-tax income the average Canadian household brings in, they literally owe $1.77 in debt. So no, you definitely aren't imagining the pressure. You are mathematically living it. It's actually one of the absolute highest debt burdens in the developed world.
To really understand this illusion, we have to look at where that supposed wealth actually lives. It boils down to the huge difference between paper wealth and liquid wealth. Get this, when you look at Canada's 2.3 million millionaires, nearly 80% of them instantly lose their millionaire status if you just strip away the illiquid equity locked inside their primary residence. Poof, gone. That drops the number of actual liquid investable millionaires down to fewer than 500,000. So most people, they aren't cash rich at all. They are entirely house rich and entirely cash poor.
Now, this cash-poor reality doesn't just happen by accident. It's fueled by what the data identifies as silent wealth killers, these everyday financial traps that are keeping even high earners completely broke. And the absolute biggest culprit right out of the gate, it's how we view transportation. We literally have to completely reframe the vehicle. An automobile is just a simple tool designed to get you to work so you can earn money. That's it. It is a depreciating trophy that you finance for 84 agonizing months just to prove to the neighborhood that you finally arrived. To see exactly why cars just destroy wealth, let's look at the 24-10 rule of affordability. This means putting 20% down, taking out a 4-year loan maximum, and keeping total transportation costs under 10% of your gross income. The brutal math here shows that even if you grind your way to a top-tier, 6-figure salary of $100,000, responsible financial math dictates you can afford an $18,800 used car with a $358 monthly payment. I know, reality check, right? That definitely does not buy a brand new luxury SUV. And that brings us right to our second silent wealth killer. The massive mortgage. Over 40% of all Canadian household wealth is sealed, completely unreachably, inside residential real estate. And strapped to that real estate is your silent roommate, mortgage interest. Over a standard 25-year amortization, you might end up paying nearly $500,000 in pure interest alone. That's an enormous, quiet wealth transfer straight from your paycheck to the bank, trapping your net worth inside your drywall where you can't even use it.
So how do we actually break out of this vicious cycle? Well, we have to move up the financial ladder to the absolute most critical first milestone. We call it the financial firewall. Look, before we can even talk about becoming a millionaire, we have to talk about saving your first $20,000 in liquid cash. We're not talking about a complicated investment portfolio here. This is the exact threshold that buys you out of daily agonizing survival mode.
Now, you might be wondering, why exactly $20,000? Because having 20 grand sitting totally liquid in a high-interest savings account or a tax-free savings account mathematically turns a devastating financial emergency into a mere inconvenience. If the transmission on your car suddenly blows or the fridge completely dies, it doesn't force you onto a 21% interest credit card that's going to bleed you dry for the next 2 years. Nope, you just pay the bill in cash and you actually get to sleep soundly that night. The science behind this is actually fascinating. It's called cognitive bandwidth. Studies show that severe financial stress drops your effective IQ by about 13 points. When you're awake at 2 a.m. worried about making rent, your brain literally lacks the processing power to spot career opportunities or negotiate effectively. That $20,000 firewall, it buys back your brain power. It buys you the leverage to look a bad boss right in the eye and say no to toxic situations. Okay, so once your mind is finally clear, the real climb begins. As the legendary investor Charlie Munger so bluntly put it, the first $100,000 is a bitch. Excuse the language, but it perfectly captures the intense psychological and mathematical grind of building your first 6 figures of actual liquid net worth. Make no mistake, it is the hardest financial mountain you will ever climb. Understanding exactly why it's so hard is key here. Hitting that first $100,000 takes the average Canadian up to 15 years. Why? Well, because at this stage, you are building wealth entirely by subtracting from your own paycheck. You're fighting the incredibly high cost of living, you're paying rent, and you're dealing with lower early career salaries, all before the magic of compound interest has a large enough base to actually help you out. Basically, you are doing all the heavy lifting yourself.
And this climb reveals a seriously stark chasm in the Canadian wealth map, especially for 35 to 44-year-olds. Get this. Homeowners in that bracket have a median net worth of $673,000, while renters sit at just $61,200. The journey to that first $100K is massively impacted by the structural divide of real estate. If you don't own property, building that first $100,000 in purely liquid assets requires an absolutely incredible level of focused discipline.
But guys, here is the genuinely thrilling part of this explainer. Once you cross that $100,000 threshold, everything shifts. It's like a whole new game. You enter a phase economists call the velocity of wealth. This is where your money finally starts making its own money. The engine stops running purely on your sweat and your paychecks, and it starts running on time and mathematics. It is a beautiful thing to see.
Enter the rule of 72. If you take that $100,000 at age 35 and just invest it in a broad market index fund with a conservative 7% real return, watch how time completely collapses. By 45, it's $200,000. By 55, it's $400,000. By 65, it's $800,000. It literally doubles every single decade without you having to add a single extra dollar of your own hard-earned money. The engine is finally building you.
But listen, you definitely do not have to wait 34 years. If you keep fueling that engine, the timeline to 1 million shrinks dramatically. If you add just $500 a month to that initial 100K, you hit $1 million in 22 years. But if you aggressively use tax-advantaged registered accounts like a TFSA or RRSP and funnel in $2,000 a month, you compress that entire timeline down to just 12 years. Let that sink in. 12 years from 100 grand to a liquid million.
Now, the people who actually go out and achieve this liquid millionaire status, they all share the exact same incredibly boring traits. Sorry to break it to you, but it's not about exotic stock picking, crypto trading at 2 a.m., or getting lucky with a lottery. It really just comes down to 3 remarkably consistent habits. Tracking every single dollar with consistent budgeting, treating your investments like a mandatory automated bill, and aggressively eliminating debt so interest isn't bleeding your compounding potential dry.
Ultimately, the true philosophy of wealth comes down to this one simple concept: the gap. Liquid wealth is not measured by the size of your salary. It is measured by the size of your gap, the distance between what you earn and what you spend. I mean, a $10 monthly gap will absolutely outwealth a highly paid surgeon who spends every cent they make. Wealth is simply how long you let that gap compound.
And that brings us to our final thought for this explainer. Wherever you are on the financial ladder right now, whether you're just trying to build that $20,000 survival firewall or you're pushing hard toward your first liquid million, your entire trajectory really comes down to this one crucial question. Is the gap between what you earn and what you spend growing, or is it not? Take control of your gap today. Thanks for joining me.